If you're just joining us, this is Firecrackers, and we are just about to start discussions on the 2025 budget presentation and what Nigerians stand to benefit. Also, I have to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Akintunde Ogunshola, an economist who is joining us live from Abuja. Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us at this time. Okay, all right. Thank you so much for joining us on Firecrackers at this time.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to be with you. Compliments of the season.
Oh, thank you so much. Wishing you same. Okay, all right. Now to the topic that we have at hand. I'll be starting with my guest here in the studio. So the 2025 budget, I would say that it's one that was eagerly anticipated by a lot of Nigerians, especially in some sectors, because when it comes to security, when it comes to health, when it comes to the economy particularly, a lot of Nigerians are expecting things to happen. Transformation, so to speak. So from the 2025 budget that was presented, let us first start with what are your thoughts on it?
Well, so let's go back to the 2024 budget. It was tagged a budget of renewed hope, but we all knew the way 2024 is, and in fact the Senate president at one point in time say, we are seeing where they are sharing free food, please avail yourself the opportunity. And we've seen the result over the last 1 week, where there were a lot of free foods and people did not eventually get the free food. People actually went to the land beyond. We wish them, we are not happy about the situation that has happened in 2024. So I think the presidency was a bit cautious when they were renaming this budget. They now said a budget of restoration. Now, there are two things that we should ask ourselves. Are we likely to experience the same thing that will happen in 2024, also in 2025? But I think there was a bit of caution, a lot of planning went into this budget than the one that earlier came out. So we saw that one of the things is that the exchange rate was pegged as 800 for the 2024 budget, which means we all know what the exchange rate went to now. In fact, but now the exchange rate was pegged at 1,500. In fact, the first statement that FEC approved 47.96 trillion as budget. The president prepared or presented 49.76. It's simply because of the difference between 1,400 that was used as the exchange rate to a dollar in the medium-term expenditure framework, and 1,500 that was presented in the budget. So the original budget that Nigeria is going to run with for 2025 was about 49.76 trillion. But something that you should also question yourself is that you are going to have the 2025 budget. We don't know when it's going to be approved. We don't know when it's going to be fully implemented. But the Senate president has already stated that the 2024 budget can also continue running till June next year, which I think is a major gap that we really need to look at. You cannot have two budgets running simultaneously. Also, if you look at it, the price from the 28.76 trillion that was approved for 2024 to 49.76 trillion that was approved for the 2025 appropriation bill, we've seen that it's an increase of 70%, about 70.33%. Now, it's simply because of the naira to the dollar exchange rate. So if we look at it, it's still more or less at par. We're still doing around cycle of like about $30 billion as the expenditure. But if you also look at the income is also projected around 34 point something trillion naira, which is like about $22 billion when we're looking at income. So we are having a budget deficit of like about $8 billion. Now, Nigeria used to be the giant of Africa when it comes to economy, but now we've been displaced by Egypt, we've been displaced by South Africa, we've even been displaced by Algeria. If we bring all these three countries together, they are not up to the population of Nigeria, but we are still not doing well. I still remember sometime in 2023 when the president made a statement that Nigeria is going to become a $1 trillion economy by 2026 or even by 2030. We know that that is more or less like a tall order, and with the way we are seeing things going, we are not likely to achieve that, because if we are going to go from 346 billion dollars to $1 trillion, it simply means we have to increase by a minimum of 38%, circa 38% year on year. And the projection for the GDP growth in the budget 2025 budget is like about 4.66%, although we had like about 3.86% as at Q3, the last GDP that we had. So it simply means that we are really growing significantly less. But Another starting thing about the 2025 budget is that about 15.81 trillion is going to be spent servicing debt. Nigeria is not yet ready for a budget surplus. The last time we had a budget surplus was sometime in 1995, 1996, which is majorly during the Abacha regime. Of course, really need to spend a lot. But where exactly is the spending going to? The biggest spender, which used to be the fuel subsidy, is gone. Of course, we can see it in the budget now that the fuel subsidy is really gone. But rather than it going to what is going to develop the nation, the concern that is going into public expenditure, we are seeing it more in the government expenditure. And the same question we keep asking ourselves. Every year they need to buy vehicles, every year they need to buy kitchen utensils, every year they need to buy plates and everything. And a bit of concern is, what does the president want to spend 9.36 billion on refreshment? What food? Is it not that it's going to go into the same bowls, or is it specially made? So there are some things that are really touchy about the budget that might require you to ask some questions. But what I can just say is that the budget is more realistic, but it's not likely to take Nigeria to where Nigeria really intends to be. So we don't expect, if the budget is going to run the same way we are seeing, and with the current indices that we are seeing currently in Nigeria, that now Dangote turning out crude oil, even though he's not able to get all his feedstock from Nigeria. We've also seen a trade surplus this year, which is one consistent with last year. In fact, significantly better than last year. We're likely to import less of fuel from Malta refineries and the rest of them, because Dangote is going to supply the nation. Although Port Harcourt refinery that was spent like about 1.5 billion that was used to rehabilitate, we saw that it has already grounded again. So I think those were some of the questions we really need to ask about. But a caution we should also take note is that Nigeria is not likely to hit a 15.75% inflation rate for 2024. Currently, inflation as at November 2024 is 34.6. We see that inflation is also likely to grow because of December festive season, but we're likely to see a bit of moderation sometime in Q2 2025. But we expect that the budget is more realistic, much more prepared. But I think it's still a far outcry from where the Nigeria we really need to be is.
Thank you so much for that. And now to our guest from Abuja, Dr. Akinsude Ogushola. You might share your thoughts with us on the 2025 budget. Do you see it as restoring the hope of Nigerians in 2025?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me today. The 2025 budget, as presented by the president, of 49.7 trillion naira, biggest budget in naira terms ever in Nigeria. But when you analyze it in terms of the dollar, is even lower than that of 2024 budget because of the exchange rate. I think the budget will only restore hope, or will bring restoration, if we can find a way to ensure that the exchange rate between the naira and the dollar comes lower. Maybe if the naira to the dollar can come a little lower, maybe like 800, 700 naira to a dollar in the course of the year, then we'll be having a lot of advantage. But if it's still sustained at 1,005 that it was pegged to be, then I don't think we'll be able to achieve, because that's part of the setback that we faced for the 2024 budget. Then talking about the parameters of the budget, the inflation rate at 15%, that in that aspect, that can be termed as over-ambitious, because the inflation might not really come so low, because now we are at 34.7 or 0.5% of inflation, and now the president is planning that inflation will come down to 15%. I don't think that might be possible. Well, there's nothing called impossibility. Let me just go faith. But economically, I don't think that can happen. But looking at other parameters, talking about the GDP rates, talking about the amount of crude oil that we're going to sell, they're going to use per day 2.1 million liters a day. Yes, our production has come up, but we can still achieve that with the relative peace that we have in Niger Delta. But the borrowing aspect, the deficit and the borrowing aspect is actually alarming, and that's why I notify Nigerians that the president has already planned to borrow. Once this budget is passed, it means that we are going to borrow. So not that when the president now writes National Assembly that he wants to borrow, now start making noise. We have already planned that we are going to borrow with this budget, and we are borrowing close to about 13 trillion to finance this budget. So that will definitely come. And talking about the borrowing might lead us to, so much debt to GDP ratio, which we are looking at. So that will be the danger.
You were talking about how Nigerians should not be surprised if the president is writing the National Assembly to borrow money once again to fund the budget.
Yeah, because it's already in the budget and it's already planned with this budget that is presented. So by the time the president is writing the National Assembly that he wants to borrow another, let's say $3 billion, we shouldn't be, complaining that he wants to borrow again. It is at this point that we can say, no, we don't want deficits or we want surplus budget. So the budget is already a plan that we're going to borrow because it's a deficit budget. Our expected revenue is lesser than our proposed expenditure. So definitely we are going to borrow to meet up the difference.
Right. So where in this budget do you think we need to brush up? Because, well, the budget is still with the National Assembly right now. So what do you think we need to brush up if we really want to be restored for 2025?
Yeah, where we need to brush up very importantly is the revenue aspect of the budget. The revenue aspect of the budget needs to be brushed up. And I think that is why the president is also seeking approval of the National Assembly for the passage of the tax reforms bill. The tax reforms bill will also help to harmonize collection of revenue and thereby also increasing government revenue. If our revenue can be, boosted, especially the non-oil revenue, as revenue from solid minerals, revenue from taxes, if it can be boosted a little, because having a big budget as this and also having it to be on a lot of deficit, if we can reduce that deficit gap, it will really help us.
Thank you so much for that. So